Namaste. Psychology and philosophy. Being with B capital and being with B small. The concept of being is an enigmatic concept in philosophy. Aristotle, Kierkegaard, Heidegger have engaged deeply with this concept. Even Indian spirituality has engaged very deeply with this concept. It would be very interesting to study how psychoanalysis engages with this concept. For this, we have with us our psychoanalysis consultant, Mr. Himanshu Vaidya. Namaste, Mr. Vaidya.
Namaste.
Uh, can we start with the concept of being with B capital and being with B small case?
This word being has been used in philosophy for over 5,000 years now. And this word is used in two ways, being with a capital B and being with a small b. Right from the Greek philosophers, even in by what we call the pre-Greek civilization philosophers of Greece, that is before Aristotle, Plato and Socrates, before them the Greeks, and in a similar zone by Indian philosophers, Chinese philosophers in their own languages, equivalent words or words near to the word being were used. So this word being, both with a capital B and a small b, and the two words are different. This word being has a history of more than 5,000 years at the least. And even today, we have ongoing discussions, ongoing uh, debates on the word being and its meaning and relevance in the area of philosophy, spirituality, and slowly, possibly getting into psychoanalysis. Let us look at what these two words mean. The word with capital B and the word with a small b. The word with capital B has general five meanings. Similarly, word with small b also has in general five meanings, the most common meanings that are uh, attributed to that word. Let us go over them and then come proper to the discussion in the context of philosophy and psychoanalysis. The word being with capital B is generally used in the following five contexts. One, being, I'm referring to five meanings of the word with capital B. Being, the first meaning is pure existence. To understand this, let us take example of a leaf. I can know what are the characteristics of a leaf. I can say it is green in color. I can say it is on a tree, it is of this size. It expands in this season. It falls in this season. But can I experience what it is to be a leaf? Even by collecting all the information together, I cannot experience what it is to be a leaf. And then I say there is something called the existence of a leaf. That if I was a leaf, I would experience this reality in a particular way. And I would experience myself in a particular way. And then I come to what is called existence of a leaf. And then I go deeper and I say, if I remove the specificities of a leaf and I go to pure existence, if I remove the leafiness of the leaf and I say there is something called pure existence on which the characteristics of being a leaf are attached. They may spring out of it, they may get attached to it, they may be together, but somehow there is something called pure existence without any qualities. And it is on this pure existence that somehow qualities get attached and a new mixed existence of pure existence and qualities comes about. But there is something called pure existence. This pure existence is the first meaning of the word being with a capital B. So the first meaning is pure existence. The second meaning is the ground of everything. That before any quality can emerge, there is pure existence. And from this pure existence, everything else emerges. All that we call qualities, these qualities emerge out of pure existence. And therefore, this pure existence, part of it gets into creation of qualities. Part of the pure being gets into creation of everything, but a part of the pure being remains pure as it is. So this pure being then becomes the ground of everything. It becomes the source of everything. And this pure being, which is the source of everything, is the second meaning. The ground and the source of the ground of everything is second meaning of the word being with capital B. The third meaning of the word being is the source, that everything emerges out of it, and therefore it is the source of everything. The fourth meaning of the word being is when we talk of stability and dynamism. This is the stable pole and everything else is in a flux. So when we are talking about the stable, this dynamism of all that goes on, I think there was a break. So the fourth meaning is about the stability and the dynamism. So the being is the stable anchor and everything else is in dynamism. It's almost like Purusha and Prakriti. And it is like being and becoming. So this is the fourth meaning of the word being. And the fifth meaning of the word being with capital B is the goal, the spiritual goal to reach pure existence. So these are the five meanings of the first word, being with a capital B. And then we can look at uh, the five meanings of the word being with a small b. And the five meanings would be, the first is being is existing, like I am a human being, or I say being a human person is not easy. So existing as a particular type of entity. So existence is the first meaning of being with small b. Second, uh, being a person living in a particular time. So locating oneself, so existing in a particular location. The second meaning of the word being at Ahmedabad. Second meaning of the word being. Third meaning of the word being is to have certain characteristics, like being a cat. It is natural. Being a cat, being a cat. It is natural that the cat should be afraid of something. So it's like uh, being a cat. It is natural. Being a cat, uh, it is natural to be afraid of a dog. So in that sense, like having certain characteristics hardwired into us because of the way we are. The fourth meaning of the word being is like something in motion, something constantly in process, in the phenomenological flux. So it is like being and becoming. So the small being is like being in a process and is used as equivalent of becoming, continuously in change, continuously in the process. So the Prakriti kind of meaning of being. And the fifth meaning of the word beings with small b is uh, to deeply be oneself. And that means that we look at deeper parts of ourselves in the form of our authentic self, our spiritual self. And in that sense, we try to find being oneself to be deeper parts of oneself, to be one's authentic self or one's spiritual self. And this is what we refer by being oneself. That there is a struggle to live a life of being oneself, which is to live out the deeper parts of us. So these are the five general meanings of the word being with a small b. And when we look at these 5 general meanings with capital B and small b, then we can get into discussion of how philosophers and psychoanalysts, generally philosophers, use this word. Coming to philosophy proper, uh, we have some important discussions done by some people which are worth a mention in our context. Heidegger talks about being there. He calls it Dasein. Being there. Being there means we are thrown into a particular situation and we are there. So being there at a particular time, in a particular point in history, we find ourselves enmeshed, immersed in a situation. And there is a sort of thrownness about our existence, that we have been thrown in there. So that is the kind of context in which uh, Heidegger uses the word being in with small b, being there, Dasein. And Heidegger does not think of anything which is capital B, pure being. He always thinks human existence actually is historical existence, always enmeshed with something and always flavored with the color of the times. There is nothing like pure existence, which is quite contrary to Indian spirituality, where we accept there is something called pure existence, and something, a part of the existence is enmeshed with our karma, with the flavor of our times, with our historical specificity, and so on. So Heidegger looks there at only at small b, but at times when he starts talking about the authentic being, indirectly he comes very near to the pure self, but given his philosophical position, he does not get there. Then we have people like Sartre, who talk about being in the world as being free. That to be is to be free. And again, he's talking about small b, being a small being, and being is being free, and therefore being free and being itself is anxiety provoking, because there is anxiety of freedom. We don't know what we will do, and there is a fear we might end up not doing the right thing. So there is a the anxiety that Sartre talks about is the anxiety of existence itself, of being, and of course we are talking about small b here. And then we have Kierkegaard, who says to be is to be free, and he calls anxiety as the dizziness of freedom. That when I stand on top of a terrace, I look down and I feel fearful, not because of falling, but because of the fear that I might decide consciously or unconsciously to fall. So it is as much a fear of oneself and one's freedom as much there is fear of uncertainty and risk of the external environment. And therefore, this word being was very important to Aristotle. It was very important to Heidegger, very important to Sartre, very important to Kierkegaard, and to many other philosophers. Unfortunately, in psychoanalysis, we have not incorporated enough this very important concept of being with capital B and being with small b. Supriya, you're muted.
Uh, then how does psychoanalysis engage with this concept? Can you share something?
Yes, in fact, psychoanalysis does not engage much with being with capital B, because psychoanalysis has not yet accepted that there can be pure existence. Psychoanalysis finds it very difficult to accept that there can be something like pure existence with capital B. And so it has left this question generally to philosophy and spirituality. So for psychoanalysis, the human system essentially is a system of small b, being of small b, always in a process. It is never without a process, it's always flavored. So there is nothing like a human experience of a pure being, either inside or outside of oneself. Now, these two experiences of pure being inside and outside have been the subject matter of spirituality and now of transpersonal psychology. The transpersonal psychology is taking note of this kind of experiences. Psychoanalysis generally has avoided this whole concept of pure being, just as it has avoided the concept of object free existence or pure affect without an object or a pure awareness concept. But these are very common in spirituality. Slowly, I think a small step is being taken where psychoanalysis looks at the participating ego and the observing ego, because the observing ego is getting out of the participating ego, and as it moves out of the whole system which is in process and one part starts looking at that system, we are slowly moving towards from small being to capital being. And in that zone between small being and capital being, there is this zone, and we have started slowly moving towards the capital being, but we still have not come to a point where the uh, the the process of the small being can cease, and the human being can for once have an experience of the capital being even while he is a small being. And it's very unfortunate because this zone of moving away from the small being towards capital being is a zone of great relaxation. It's a zone of great pleasantness and bliss. It's a zone of great healing. It's a zone of exploration of occult and hidden human potential. It's also a zone that we have not explored enough in psychology, and we are just beginning in that zone. So it's very unfortunate that this whole zone and the end point of that zone, which is pure existence, have been out of psychoanalysis till now.
Heidegger talks about being with B in small letter, but for whom being with B capital is a question.
Yes,
So how is this explained by psychoanalysis?
it is not explained at all, and it should be explained, because uh, Heidegger puts a very right question that we are unique kind of organisms who question their own meaning, who question the relevance of their own existence. Other organisms don't have this question. So a human being is a specific kind of being for whom being is a question. So it's a very unique kind of a being who starts questioning his own being, the small being, and also has hypothetical speculations and concerns about the capital being. So this is something very important that Heidegger points out, that we are a human being is a being for whom being is a question. His famous statement is being for whom being is a question, which is not true for all other animals and other organisms. Now, from a strictly psychoanalytic point of view, this question of being belongs neither to id nor to ego. It's a superego question. If you put in that constellation, it becomes a superego question. And this gets us to uh, a point where we realize that there is a split in the very psychoanalytic structure of the mind, where we look at id as all the problem zone and the superego as the ideal zone, although we also talk about superego pathology, but this is the ideal zone. We don't say anything ideal is in the id. And this, I think, will undergo a change very soon, that we will realize, as we have realized the superego, that superego has both the good and the not good parts. The persecutory, masochistic, punishing part, as well as the motivating, enabling, strength giving, uh, happiness giving, direction giving, purpose of life giving positive part. Similarly, the Eid also has two parts, the positive and the negative. Unfortunately, we have not looked at the positive part of the Eid or the positive part of the superego enough, because we are obsessed now with pathology being rooted in the Eid and the second category, which we call the superego pathology. But we have not looked at the pleasant and the strong and the positive part of Eid and the positive part of superego. Not given adequate attention. I think when we deal with subjects like this, we have no choice but to get to the positive part of the mind in the id or in the superego. And this, I think, is more of a superego concern. So when we look at the purpose of life, essentially it's a ideal finding exercise. So when we contemplate on such deep philosophical or spiritual issues, essentially we are dealing with the good part of the superego. That part which is concerned with the purpose of life, deeper experiences of life, and not given to survival of the ego or the impulses of the id. Therefore, we'll have to look at the positive part of the superego, which wants to explore, experience far more than ordinary life, and explore this parapsychological and spiritual zone, and try to not only live the authentic self and the spiritual self part of oneself, but to go deeper and experience the pure being. Now, this search itself is an ennobling search. It's not only ennobling search, it's also an enabling search. It strengthens, and there is something called the superego strength and the superego happiness, which we have not recognized and tapped into as yet. The superego strength and the superego happiness are very important strength and happiness giving and quality of life giving factors. So the moment we get into this kind of questions, where we say the search of the being, the meaning of being, the quest to experience or explore pure existence, pure being, looking at a group of people for whom a very strong component of pathology and healing has to deal with uh, finding the questions, answer to the deeper questions of life, like the group of people who would respond very well to logotherapy. This group of people, when they come to psychoanalysis, they need precisely this kind of a discussion, because for them, finding of the purpose of life and then to collect the superego strength and superego happiness, once you find the purpose of life, and that itself strengthens the ego, gives you more happiness, overcomes or balances the negative effect, and helps you to accelerate on the process of healing. So the acceleration of healing through the path of superego, not to look at superego only as a source of superego pathology, but also as a source of superego healing, superego strength, superego purpose. When this starts flowing from the superego, automatically the ego strength enhances, and we are much better in a position to proceed, accelerate on the path of healing. So this bringing in these questions not only provides a balanced diet to the mind, not only makes psychoanalysis more holistic, but it is a necessity for one group of people whose primary difficulty, apart from all other difficulties, is finding the purpose of life or finding a space, a safe space to discuss these things. They never got a space to discuss these questions, which they always suppress in themselves out of fear that they will be mocked at, shamed, or attacked. So there is a group of people for whom the spiritual and philosophical discussions and clarity, and through that finding the purpose of life. And this requires three things. One, a discussion on questions of this type. Two, articulation of one's desires. And three, mixing the two to create an idea of a good life. And once the whole personality agrees on this self-discovered idea of a good life, superego provides huge amount of happiness and strength for healing and towards achieving that idea of a good life. And this enormous strength given by the superego we have not actually used. So apart from expanding its own horizons, exploring those areas which traditionally were in philosophy and not in psychoanalysis, it is also necessary for quality of life of patients and for healing that we bring in these concepts and sort of expand the concerns of psychoanalysis to incorporate the concepts of small being, capital being, and the zone in between.
How does Indian spirituality engage with this concept?
In many ways, actually. One is the whole concept of reincarnation is about experiencing oneself as small being many times so that ultimately one gets free from it and one is able to experience being as capital B, as the ground of everything, which we say the oceanic oneness. And this oceanic oneness has to be experienced after a long training so that it becomes on demand. It does not become an occasional accident, because one has to understand how to get into that experiential state and what keeps one away from that experiential state. So that it does not become an accident or grace, it becomes a self-trained accomplishment where one can go on demand into that state. So the oceanic state is very important because in Indian spirituality that's the goal. So the goals typically are that first to get into a state of no thought and then get into a state of oneness. So the moment one is in the state of no thought, one is observing the being, the small being, but one is still not with the capital being. One is in the middle zone. And slowly as one proceeds, one is able to experience pure existence and the oceanic oneness of the whole existence. The third is about the whole idea of uh, the relevance of even the small being, that one cannot jump to the experience of the capital being without having lived out a program of life. And this program of life, the program of the being with small b, has two components: a need of the soul to experience various things, and second, to settle the account of karma. So the program of life has these two elements, and over many lifetimes, according to Indian spirituality, when enough of uh, essences of experiences have been accumulated, one gets ready to get into a state of no thought, be free from the small being inside of oneself, and then experience the capital B. And for accelerating this process, there are not one or 10, but hundreds of techniques in Indian spirituality. And very important part is that this attaining the observer position and being free from being completely overwhelmed by the processes of the small being. With that starts a very pleasant zone of experience. So this partial freedom, even occasional, when one gets into what psychoanalysis called the observer status versus the participant status, then the mind splits into two: the participating mind and the observing mind. And the ratio may be 10 is to 90. That 90% of the mind is involved and 10% of the mind is observing that 90%. But this 10% slowly expands and the 90% slowly shrinks, ultimately leading to only the observer and nothing being observed, a state of no thought. And this journey, when the moment one becomes even temporarily free for a few minutes out of the overwhelming effect of the being, small being, this after that the journey is very pleasant and the quality of life enhances manifold, and there is a very big jump in the healing potential of oneself. So this is something that we have not tapped because it is too occult and abstruse, And this is not everyone's experience. This is one of the rare experiences. And rare experiences are always difficult to establish scientifically because we don't have adequate number of sample. It's not everyone's everyday experience. So being overwhelmed with the small being is our everyday experience, everyone's everyday experience. But to be free from it is not everyone's everyday experience, it's a rare experience. But if we take this rare experience, make it an important component of therapy, that is where psychoanalysis would come together with spirituality. And that I think if we are able to do in some way, and then do it empirically as we understand it more, and develop tools and techniques for it apart from what exists in spirituality, using psychoanalytic knowledge, if we can develop some more tools, that will be a great enrichment of psychoanalysis. As of now, we have not done it, but I think the way things are going in the area of transpersonal psychology, parapsychology, positive psychology, human potential movement, and people's interest in spirituality and holistic healing, I think soon we will be expanding psychoanalysis, or if psychoanalysis is too rigid, then somebody like me will come up with something called spiritual psychoanalysis. So let us see how it rolls on.
We come to our last question. I would just try to give my understanding from what you have discussed. Like philosophy has engaged, or philosophers have deeply engaged with this concept of being with capital B and also small b. Spirituality has also engaged with that. Psychoanalysis has kept away from it in a way,
Right.
in a large way. So, if it becomes a combination of all the three, a new way possibly or a new path could emerge.
Yes, yes. I think it's very right. I think that is how
Yeah.
it should go, because these rare experiences are not pathological experiences. They are very enriching experiences. They are the psychological horizon expanding experiences. So these spiritual experiences of uh, moving away from being overwhelmed by the small being, experiencing the large being, the capital being, or being in the zone in between, these are very pleasant experiences, very enlightening experiences, enriching experiences, and human potential realizing experiences.
Right.
So this is something which is, if we look at quality of life, these are quality of life enhancing experiences, not only the knowledge domain enhancing experiences.
Right.
And this is where I think the journey has to be, the next step has to be taken, that we bring in these concepts first into psychoanalysis, accept the possibility that such experiences can happen. Then look at how psychoanalytic theory would have to be modified if we accept such experiences. And that will have an impact on all the three major elements of psychoanalysis: model of the mind, pathogenesis, and the healing technique. And once we accept this, tools which are in other areas of spirituality and philosophy, these tools also can be incorporated into psychoanalysis. And this will help us undertake a major modification of how we look at superego and how we look at the spiritual aspect of life. Because uh, psychoanalysis traditionally has looked at man essentially as a desire driven animal with no possibility of being free from desire. So, this very quest to be free from desire is looked upon with suspicion, that the normal tendency of the human mind is to get lost in the satisfaction of desire. If somebody is trying to be free from desire, it's a defensive movement against something difficult in the unconscious. So the whole spiritual movement then becomes pathological. It's looked upon as a defensive movement. Right? So if we don't get into that old limitation of psychoanalysis, right, of there being nothing but the whole omnipotent id. because there is an implicit assumption of an omnipotent id, and anything that goes outside of it is basically a defense against something in the id. If we don't get into the traditional way of looking at things, but if we accept that the superego and the concerns of superego are much more than what we have assumed, and these concerns are even more as much as legitimate as the concerns of id and ego, at times even more legitimate, and a journey into that concept, that part of the superego or what it asks us to do, can be a very enriching and healing journey. So it's good not only for quality of life but also for healing, and it will help us to recast the way we look at the human integer, the way we look at life, the way we look at causes of difficulty, the way we look at the healing process itself, and thereby the therapy process itself. So it will be very liberating and enriching for psychoanalysis if it can expand to incorporate these elements, and along with these elements, right, also the tools that this concept will bring with itself, and that also will enrich the way we do psychoanalysis.
Right. One more question from my side, if we have some time.
Yeah,
Is it?
we
Yeah. Okay. Do you think Carl Jung tried to say something more than, or try to go beyond this
Yes,
frame?
yes, he did. I think he's an exception in psychoanalysis because uh, you got it's a good question, because you got that specific group of patients in the later part of his practice where the meaning of life was a very core concern, and much of their suffering was because of a skewed and contracted concerns of life. Life was not wide enough to accept the five parts of human integer, and this brings us to a very important concept. Good that you brought up this question. If we look at the human integer, we can divide human existence into five parts: the biological, the emotional, the intellectual, the artistic, and the spiritual. And just as the body needs balanced diet, the mind also requires a balanced diet. And therefore, to be healthy and happy, we need some nourishment on all the five levels. Unfortunately, we are not getting a balanced diet. And the balanced diet is actually being condemned and criticized by what is unfortunately a very reductionist science and a very reductionist psychoanalysis, and much of behavioral psychology also. So Carl Jung did find this, that for many people the purpose of life and the quest to have these rare experiences, the exploration of mystical and spiritual part of oneself, was a very core concern in their healing process. And I think with one of the patients, he remarked, thank God he became neurotic. And that was because this neurosis brought him to Jung, and that helped him to explore life and emerge as a far more multifaceted person than what he was when he came into therapy. So he could embrace the wideness of life and look at all the five layers of human existence: the biological, the emotional, the intellectual, the artistic, and the spiritual. And uh, Jung, therefore, is an exception. Kohut goes to some extent, but not far enough. And people who have tried actually were too constrained by the force of orthodoxy in psychoanalysis, and most of them went out and started on their own something different. But nobody has been able to uh, make psychoanalysis learn the lesson of adapting to reality. So psychoanalysis talks about it, but psychoanalysis itself is not very good at adapting to reality when the reality is changing with new concepts emerging in reality. So in that sense, Jung was an exception uh, for whom the spiritual and the mystical experiences were very important parts of one's healing process. Similarly, we also take a look at Viktor Frankl, logotherapy. For him also this was very important. This whole idea of a purpose of life. Not necessarily that purpose of life has to, according to him, get into mystical and spiritual areas. One may even look at it a secular area. But what we have to look at is the significance of this purpose of life, this part of the superego, and this natural necessity in human beings to explore the intellectual, creative, spiritual, occult parts of oneself. And this is where the concepts of being and being are very important. That the moment you get these concepts in, a new kind of thinking emerges, and that leads to 100 other things. So, what Jung did, I think that spirit has to be brought in, even if one does not uh, accept or agree with all the concepts of Jung. That spirit is very important, the essential part, that the human integer is a wide integer and you cannot reduce it to a few impulses of the id. That is not to say that those impulses don't exist. The pathological id does not exist. Of course it exists. All the three exist. The abnormal component, the normal component, and the supernormal component, all the three exist in all human beings. The proportion varies. So we have been generally dealing with the abnormal component and not appreciating enough the supernormal component. So if we bring in Jung, if we bring in the spirit of what we discussed today, the philosophical concept of being and being, I think it can be a good way to start a journey. And my personal belief is it's a very uh, true, correct journey. It is not something poetic. It is not something metaphoric. It's a literal truth that we are dealing with. It's a scientific truth, and it will enrich psychoanalysis.
Uh, Mr. Vadya, we had a very good discussion on being and being from philosophical point of view, psychological point of view, and spiritual point of view, and how these two can, how these three can come together and enhance the psychological perspective. So thank you for this. Uh, and okay, namaste.
Namaste.
Do write to us at hveindia@gmail.com. Thank you.